So, if you spent any time in church, then you've probably heard it said or taught that the law has been done away with. And I used to believe that too. But the more I started to read the Bible for myself, the more I began to understand that that is just not the case. And the more I began to study, the more I began to realize that the things that I were being taught were just not lining up with the truth. So I began to dig deeper and began to research. And then that led me to the Torah community. And for a little while, I really had thought that I had just found the missing piece. Again, over time, I just started to realize that things were just not quite right. They were a little off balance. There was a lot of legalism and a lot of measuring your righteousness based on your performance and that sort of thing. And again, much of what I was learning from the Torah community in that aspect, again, just wasn't quite lining up to the heart of what I was reading. But now, with some time and prayer and having experience with both perspectives, I finally feel like I'm coming to this place of balance in truth and in spirit. Walking out biblical faith today, it's not about throwing out the law, but it's also not about obsessing over every little technical detail either. But it is about understanding the spirit behind the instruction. The written Torah, it was never about, just checking off a list, or it wasn't meant to be like a cold rule book, so to speak. It was always about the heart. Messiah said, referring to the law, "You have heard it said, do not murder, but I tell you, do not even hate." And that's a powerful statement because he's actually even raising the bar, or raising the standard higher. So even right here in this example, the written law is a physical shadow, but it's the heart intent. The heart is the purpose. So, the letter says do not murder. The spirit says uproot anger. The letter says don't commit adultery, but the spirit says guard your thoughts. Now, take clean and unclean food laws, for example. Those commands were and are wisdom. They are for our health. They are for our protection. They are for a sign for our set apartness. But now you have to consider, today, there are thousands of different preservatives and chemicals and things in our foods that definitely would be considered unclean. But of course, they're not going to list those in the Bible because that wasn't a thing in that time. They just didn't exist, so they didn't need to be put into the law at that time. So again, in this instance, it's not just about the written law. It's about the spirit and the principle of why it was written. So while of course pig is horrible, I would never eat pig, but it's just not about is this pig or not. It's about, is this good for my body? Is this going to benefit my temple? Or is it going to make me sick or cause disease down the road? So the point in that is that the spirit of the law is so much more than just a list. All right, so what about Sabbath? Sabbath is still a command, but what is the principle? It's about rest. It's about set apart time. It's about trust, spending the time with the Father. Now, in biblical times, things like lighting a fire or cooking food, those were very labor-intensive things to do, whereas like today, it's just a matter of turning a knob or flipping a switch. But that still doesn't mean that we just treat it like any other day. We still prepare, we simplify, we slow down. But the heart of Sabbath is not about like technical legalities. It's just about rest and not treating it as just another day that's business as usual. Really, it all comes down to just having that covenant relationship with the Father. Now, regarding other laws, there were whole sets of laws for like priests and for temple service, for a functioning theocratic nation. And you know, we don't have a temple today. We don't have that same kind of government structure. But that doesn't mean that Torah is meaningless. It just means that context matters. And you know, one thing that is so important to know is that your obedience or your ability to perform or do, that's not going to earn your salvation. We can't perform our way into eternal life. But you know, faith without obedience is also not faith. You know, salvation is a gift, a beautiful gift, but our obedience is more so a response in love. And if you love Yahuwah, then you want to keep and follow his instructions. And not to be saved, but because you are. So in reality, the spirit of the law covers far more than what the written law can even cover. So again, the written law was just a shadow, whereas the spirit of the law is really the heart of the instruction. So what does living Torah today look like? It's guarding your speech and honoring your body. It's setting apart Sabbath and loving your neighbor. It's being honest and showing mercy and living humbly. So it's not a burden, it's a blessing. You know, Torah means instruction, and his instructions are for our good. So, you know, if you've ever been stuck between the law is dead and legalism is holiness, I understand. I've been in both places. But there is a beautiful middle ground of spirit and truth. And that's what I'm learning to walk in. I hope that encourages you today, my friend. And wherever you are at in your journey, I pray that Yahuwah blesses you as you seek him.